Rules Committee meeting. I'm looking at my computer and looking at the wrong thing. Rules Committee meeting on Monday, February 6, 2012. It's about 6:07. We have a quorum. And is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of December 5th, 2011? Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okey doke. The next item is amendments to the City Code regarding government of Evanston Public Library.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. You have before you a report that I've prepared asking that the committee pass along to the City Council its recommendation regarding ordinance number 12-0-12, which would amend the Evanston City Code to make certain changes regarding the Evanston Public Library Board's authority and budget. As you are all aware, the City Council has discussed this issue on numerous occasions over the last few years. With the adoption of your current year city budget, the City Council created a library fund to separately account for the revenues and expenditures of the library. With Library Director Mary Johns' resignation this past summer and the current recruitment underway for a new library director, I believe it's appropriate for the City Council to consider further changes in the authority of the Library Board in the areas of budget and governance to more consistently reflect the operation of other city libraries in Illinois. With the recruitment of the new library director ongoing, final candidates should be identified by March 1st. I thought it was appropriate at this time to bring this issue back before the Rules Committee and then the City Council. Ordinance 12-0-12 would transfer the authority of the management of the library to the Library Board, including transfer of authority of the appointment of the library director from the city manager to the Library Board. In addition, the ordinance would amend the City Code to authorize the Library Board as of January 1, 2013, to adopt the budget for the library and to set a library property tax levy. However, I do believe that with the proposed ordinance, there are additional measures that need to be considered, and I'm recommending this evening that the Rules Committee recommended the City Council the creation of a joint committee with the Library Board to include 2 members of the City Council, 2 members of the Library Board, myself, and the new Library Director to meet to consider other operational issues to further the transition to the new library operations model. The issues that would be considered include appropriate charges for city property and services by the city to the library fund for next year and beyond, to determine the appropriate cost allocation of previous library capital improvement debt and creation of a library debt service fund, consideration of a temporary loan in FY 2013 to the city, from the city to the library fund to cover any potential cash shortfalls caused by the timing of tax payments, consideration of transfer from the city to the library fund of some amount for an operating reserve, and then any additional amendments that might be required to the Evanston City Code regarding library governance. I believe that the proposed amendments and the proposed committee will help with a smooth transition of governance of the Evanston Public Library to a model more comparable with Illinois city libraries. And one final note, for those of you who have reviewed carefully the ordinance, you may note that Section 1-9-1 of the ordinance, when it talks about municipal officers and departments, lists some positions that we no longer have. This was done because we are kind of between codes where the council has approved the codification of the new code, but until that is completed, we are looking at amending the language of the old code. So this will all get cleaned up in the wash with if the ordinance is approved, but I just wanted to call to the committee's attention. That's why you see some positions that entitled names that have changed over time. Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's been a long couple of years talking about library issues and library governance issues. I think that this council has been willing to consider these issues, but on a time schedule that you believe was appropriate. And I think now, after 2 years of discussion, this ordinance and the proposed committee help ease us into a final 3rd year of transition so that come January 1st, 2013, we would have completed the transition from our current model of governance of the Evanston Public Library to a model that's more consistent with other cities around Illinois. So happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bobkowitz. A couple of questions and some clarification. It looks as if under the proposed ordinance, the appointment of our Library Board of Trustees, the trustees would be made pursuant to state law, And that state law provision is for staggered 3-year terms. I don't know how long our trustees serve right now. But staggered 3-year terms appointed by the mayor, with the mayor having the power to remove trustees as provided under the Illinois Municipal Code. And is that what we intend?
Mr. Farrar assisted with the drafting of the specific language. Would you like to speak to that?
Members of the council, Grant Farrar, Corporation Counsel. With respect to the language as currently drafted, it parallels the Illinois Library Act with respect to the appointment issue. So it's just tracks that language.
Do our trustees now serve 4-year terms or 3-year terms?
As I sit here, I'm not.
3-year terms. They're signaling from using
Looks like 3-year terms.
3-year terms. All right. So not much would change, actually, then, if we move to the independent library governance as to the appointment of our board of trustees.
With respect to the length of
Right.
terms, correct.
Right. Or the method and manner of appointment.
Correct.
As to the provision for removing the library as a formal city department, maybe this is within the purview of the library committee. Would we contemplate then additional mechanisms or opportunities for the library board of trustees to communicate with or interact with the city council about library issues or other departments such as recreation or economic and community development? There being, I think, a lot of overlap in the mission and purpose of our library board of trustees and some of the city departments, because they have worked together in the past. We don't see that ending if the library board is its own entity, do we?
Committee member Grover, members of the committee, no, we don't. And perhaps we could even make an adjustment to that section 1-9-1 to indicate that the library director remains a city department director, but one that does not report to the city manager. So if the committee would like, we can make those adjustments. We're asking that the committee forward this to the council for first reading next week, so we can make that adjustment either for next week or certainly for final reading 2 weeks after.
And one more question for me. The committee, the joint committee with members of the library board, the city council, city manager, and library director to kind of manage the transition, would the committee would report its findings by the end of July. Do you anticipate there being additional need for the committee to operate during the transition?
Alderman Grover, members of the committee, I think I would leave that up to the committee.
Yeah.
And if they determine that that's useful, I think that would be important. I think one of the reasons I am proposing it at this time is because in the previous 2 years of discussion, I think that there were incremental issues that needed to be addressed. I think we're now at that final step, and I think that close cooperation on these key issues will be important to it being successful. So if it makes sense to keep this committee going through the end of the calendar year or perhaps even beyond, I think whatever will help make the library successful, the new library director successful, certainly makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry. I think for the new library director to be successful, it's tremendously important that the director be appointed by the library board and that they will do the best possible job of working together if that is the case. And I promised the library board that I would argue in favor of that tonight. So I am doing that, and I move approval of the ordinance.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a question, and that are there any other taxing authorities in the city that do not have an elected board?
Alderman, Chair Fisk, members of the committee, I am not aware of any. This is a model for a library board that is standard for other municipal libraries. My understanding is that we are the only community with a city library whose library board does not have that taxing authority. So it is something that does not come from the local government, but instead comes from the Illinois General Assembly and the Illinois Library Act. So long answer to your question is no. There are no others in Evanston that I'm aware of.
If we wanted to, if the taxpayers of Evanston wanted the board to be elected at large, how would they go about that?
I'll look to the city attorney for assistance. That would be transitioning the model. There are two types of municipal libraries in Illinois. There's the city library, city village library model, and the library district model. The library district has its member boards of directors directly elected. That would be a change in form of government. My understanding is that would require a vote of the people. I'll look to the city attorney, who probably has a better answer off the top of his head.
Chair Fisk, members of the committee, moving to a library district would contemplate a referendum proposition submitted. So, and the timeline for that would of course vary depending upon the election calendar.
Thank you. Alderman Burris.
Thank you. I won't be voting for the ordinance, which is probably no surprise to anyone. And it goes along the lines of, once again, having an entity that can put taxes on residents without having really any accountability. None of our other boards or commissions do that, and I have real concerns with that. So that's first, and I realize that the majority, probably the overwhelming majority, are happy to vote for it and actually kind of be done with having to come back to council, and I appreciate that. But my second comment is the appointment of this interim, I guess, advisory committee board of that makeup for that. What concerns me about that makeup is there are a lot of fiscal issues that are going to be addressed as part of that board of everything from what debt service will be taken on, what this new board entity will be responsible for. And my concern comes from the deliberations that have happened over the course of the last several years in regards to the library and not being as fiscally conservative or sound as we could be. So as these appointments are being made, it may make some sense to have people on this committee that maybe voted against giving ultimate control to the library. Maybe people on this committee that didn't vote to keep the branches open. So having a more of a balance than just people on the committee that are 100% let's do this and are completely maybe not as questioning as some others. So just to look at the balance and to be financially cognizant of what we're doing when we make this transition. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments? Okay, there's a motion that's been seconded. All in favor? Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Utilities Commission. Welcome, Utilities Commission.
Thank you. My name is Mike Smith. I'm the chair of the Utilities Commission. We distributed our proposed work plan projects for the next 2 years, and they're a reflection of projects in addition to our normal workload or our normal responsibilities. What I want to do tonight is give you some history of the Utilities Commission, where we were, where we are, and where we're going, which is, again, reflected in our work plan. The Energy Commission was the forerunner of the Utilities Commission. It was formed as I understand, in the early 1990s, arising from significant reliability issues with electricity in the city of Evanston. So the Energy Commission was formed to address those reliability issues, to look at legislation that would affect the distribution and procurement of electricity, and to negotiate a franchise agreement. To give you perspective, typically a franchise agreement is the agreement between the municipality and the electric utility, and they typically last 50 years or so or more. After the Energy Commission, our franchise agreements were 3 years in length, and one of the things for that was to sort of keep pressure on Commonwealth Edison to be more proactive. Our most recent franchise agreement is for 5 years because of perceived improvements in the reliability. We also spent probably 5 to 10% of our time discussing the natural gas utility in Evanston. Obviously, didn't need to spend as much time because there weren't as many issues. And this is the original ordinance establishing the Energy Commission, and the underlining is the highlight to improve the electrical service in Evanston. So when we talk about the electric service in Evanston, this is what we're talking about. The power is produced at the power plant where this coal-fired nuclear goes through the big high towers you will see. Then it goes to a substation. The largest one in Evanston is along Emerson Avenue. So our purview has been from the power substation to the house. And that's where we focused our attention and on our discussions with Commonwealth Edison. In October of 2010, the city underwent some reorganization of its commissions, and we got some additional responsibilities. In addition to electricity and natural gas, we now get involved in the water plant, the water lines, the sewers, and the ordinance now covers telephone. And most of our ongoing discussions have been on the water plant and the sewers, what's appropriate fees, what's a good replacement schedule. And this is the current purpose of the Utility Commission, and it reflects the previous slide to focus on these areas to ensure reliable and competitive service, and that we will listen to the citizens' concerns. The Utility Commission, there are 7 members. We meet the second Friday of every month at the water plant, and members of the public are welcome to attend. They just need to make arrangements for that. What you have before you are some projects that we think are appropriate given where we are and where our new responsibilities with the water and sewer lines, and where we think we need to go, because the background of the people, most of us are engineers or have some technical background in these areas. So again, these are the projects we came up with that we will be forming subcommittees to work on these projects. And you can see that not only are they electric and water efficiency, they're the long-term needs of the water and sewer systems throughout the city. So, if you look, even though they tie back to some of these items that we've been discussing, they're really more in terms of the city's focus on reducing carbon footprint by improving our energy efficiency and improving the water conservation. So at some point, we would like the purpose of the commission to be modified to reflect that we would, in addition to these tasks, we would also provide assistance to the Evanston Office of Sustainability in the areas of energy efficiency in city buildings, the development of a building operating energy guideline, and water conservation guidelines. And that's it. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alderman Burris, you were first, and then Alderman Grover.
Thank you. This is great, and I'm glad to see that the part of that you want to do is with sustainability, obviously,
Yes.
And doing some baseline studies. So I really appreciate that. Is there a way to link that back to the Environment Board as well, working with the
Yes.
Environment Board, and is that discussed?
Yes, I attended an Environment Board meeting. Catherine Hurley is trying to organize a meeting with all of the more than 20 groups in Evanston that are involved in sustainability or green issues. So we'll be participating in that to improve the cross-communication of those types of issues.
Right, and I really appreciate, because I know many of our city buildings are extremely high on using a lot of resources when we could be much more efficient than we are. So it would be great to see that study in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I want to first thank your former colleagues on the commission, Joel Freeman and Bill Siegfried, I think, who have just cycled off after serving for 8 years. And
Joel cycled off a year ago.
Yeah.
Bill's term ends in March.
Right, so thank you to
Yes,
them
you know,
for
it's
their
like
long service to the commission.
There's been a very strong foundation to the people, for the people on the commission now. And we do have, Dave Grumman was a former member. He was a member. He's returned to help us, give us a historical perspective.
Well, thank you, Mr. Grumman. It's a very ambitious work plan, and you only have 7 members on the commission.
Yes.
I hope you get help from the Environment Board and other groups as needed, because it's quite a lot of work to do in your work plan. I appreciate it.
Well, some of these were developed because there are members of the board that have a particular interest. So if they have a particular interest, they're expected to take the lead on those projects.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you so much for coming
Thank you.
tonight. Okay, the next item on our agenda is cancellation of the March 12th, 2012 council meeting due to anticipated lack of a quorum.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, many of you are planning on attending the National League of Cities winter meeting in Washington, D.C. That week. We anticipate as many as 5 of you will be excuse me. Will be attending. So we'd like to just say that that's the case, and no formal action is required of the committee or the council. The clerk can just post a notice saying that the meeting will not be happening. You do have a meeting scheduled for the following week, the 19th, that third Monday meeting, which is usually discussion topics. We will likely ask you to at least have an Administration and Public Works Committee meeting on the 19th to deal with bills and other pressing matters. We'll try to leave it at just AMPW and not P&D, but wanted to at least alert you that that will likely be a possibility then for the 19th. And so if we can do AMPW, then lead into 7 p.m. With the other business of the council. I know we're already scheduled to hear back from the mayor's homeless task force that evening. We're scheduled to get an update on water sales that evening, and we're scheduled to get a look at a new economic development plan that is tentatively set to be before the Economic Development Committee on the 22nd of February. So a full agenda of other items, but again, it looks as if there will not be a quorum on the 12th, and so we just want to share that information.
Thank you. Is there any new business? Then the meeting is adjourned.
I
Ed.
do.
We need to call the city
Okay,
council to order.
Yeah, so that's meetings adjourned. And
Mayor can call the city council.
we need the city clerk for it.
I believe the city clerk was here. Maybe see if the city clerk will call the roll.
It was down on the TV.
I can call the roll.